This panel is, I hope, going to be quite an interesting one. The whole subject of age verification is, without doubt, internationally interesting to lots and lots of people. It's a dynamic that is being thought about or being considered by every single human being you could possibly imagine that's involved in government, whether they're involved in the adult industry. The whole thing about age verification is quite prolific, and of course over the last few years, with the advent of APVOD coming in with their laws and regulations, and then the manifestos by the Conservative government when they got in this year, a lot's changed. And if you look over, I guess, maybe just the last 8 weeks, you've had India trying to ban, I think, 857 sites. Last week, Russia tried to ban Pornhub. Today, the Australian government have come out and said they want much more done about age verification. Last year, Iceland said, we don't want anybody in our country to access pornography. The Canadians have said, whatever happens in the United Kingdom, we want to follow. So there are many, many countries all over the world that have got an issue with age verification. And it's one of these, I've been very heavily involved in it for a long time, and it's one of these very challenging things that everybody that gives you a statistic, there's another statistic that can counter that. Terry may have thoughts about something being suspicious or somebody trying to fix something. It's not. You know, I just think that there's over the period of years, human beings have got used to, you know, you've got to be 16 to buy a packet of cigarettes. In America, you've got to prove you're 21 before you get a drink. You've got to be a certain age before you drive a car. The internet's been a bit of a wild west. It can't be re-engineered, but we're now in a position where it's so mainstream, even adult content is so mainstream. It's no longer getting a dirty magazine out the hedgerow. It's in everybody's room, on everybody's phone. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why the whole subject about age verification is so prominent. Talking of prominence, I've got 3 fantastic guys here. Well, 2 and Vince. Between the 4 of us, we spent many, many years and got a lot of knowledge and experience, as are several of the people sitting here today. So if I could start with you, Vince, to introduce yourself and your sheer levels of dealings to this delightful crowd.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction. My name is Vince Charlton. I'm the European Director for ASACP, which is the Association of Sites Advocating Child Protection. We developed the Restricted to Adults label, which works in conjunction with parental filters to block access to adult sites. We were the first child support hotline for child sexual abuse. I hate the term child pornography. I'm a great supporter of what UCAP are trying to achieve. Pornography, in my mind, is completely legal, 100% legal. Child sexual abuse and is not legal. And those people should be put against the wall and shot. So I hate the term child pornography. There is no such thing in my mind.
I'm Chris Ratcliffe. I'm the Managing Director of adult broadcaster Portland TV. We operate TV channels across the Virgin Sky and Freeview platforms in the UK. We also operate on-demand services that sit under APVOD. We'll hear a lot about APVOD over the course of the next hour. I'm sure you already heard about that in the last session as well with UCAP. I chair the Adult Provider Network, which is a coalition of APVOD notified services wrestling with age verification and the challenges that face us, but no one based offshore, another issue we'll talk about this afternoon. I also am industry lead on the Digital Policy Alliance Age Verification Working Group. That's the cross-party voice of the internet and technology sector in Westminster. So what we're doing through the DPA is bringing this issue of age verification into a parliamentary arena. And again, that is very pertinent given what we'll talk about in terms of the government's position over the course of the next hour. DPA is working towards a BSA standard, a publicly available specification for age verification, which would set a recognised standard for AV, not just for the adult industry, but for other sectors who are involved in the online retail of age-restricted products and services. So this isn't just an adult concern, although that's our focus this afternoon. More on all that later.
I'm Jerry Barnett. I've been around the online porn industry for about 20 years, originally as a technologist, and then I launched my own VOD site in 2004. And I was also chairman of ATA, which is now defunct trade association for a while. In that role, I came into contact with Pete Johnson when he was at the BBFC and got involved with his early scheme, BBFC Online, which kind of really was what eventually became APVOD and APVOD's regulations. My own business clashed with APVOD, and I decided that there were some important issues here that needed campaigning on, so I set up Sex and Censorship a couple of years ago. I'm very concerned, not with age verification, such as nothing wrong with age verification and the technologies around that, but the implications of what that means, the other things that are going to happen in order to make age verification work, I think I find very worrying.
And I'm Steve Wynyard. I'm a director and vice president of ICM Registry. We're the guys that operate the top level domains, .xxx, porn, adult and sex. Before we start getting into some real juicy bits of detail, one thing I often see and hear is the enormous breadth of opinion about age verification in general. And the one thing I want to throw out to these great guys here is possibly what could be an unfair question. What actually do you think, if you were going to give the adult industry any advice as to where they should currently be thinking, what would it be? And the reason I ask that question is because, for example, I'm going to read this out, and this was actually in the XBiz article promoting this particular seminar, and it said, for many in the adult industry, the call for age verification is equivalent for a call for censorship. Now, I'm not totally sure whether, as an industry, we should be still throwing out those challenging thoughts, or whether we should say, well, actually, there's enough being done across the world now that says age verification has to happen. Should we be taking a different viewpoint? So, Chris, if I could ask you first, what do you think the adult industry should be thinking?
As far as AV is concerned, I think the problem is where AV is in its infancy. I think what we immediately need to look at is where the gambling industry stands now. The gambling industry over the course of the last 10 years has been forced to embrace age verification. It's an industry that didn't want that level of regulation and scrutiny, but was forced to adopt it. It jumped through the hoops, and I don't think that industry has looked back particularly. I mean, there's plenty of people in the room who've served that industry, nodding heads there to say, and I think what's interesting about where we're at, contrary to where the gambling industry's at, we're not talking about identifying people. I think this is the problem. We conflate these two issues. Age verification is immediately attached to identity. If a consumer wants to access my services, I don't necessarily need to know who they are. I don't need to identify them. I just simply need the assurance that they are over 18. So what we're pushing for is a lighter touch approach. Now, the reason I mention the gambling industry, because in the gambling industry they have broader concerns for anti-money laundering regulation, and they are required to verify who that person is and verify their identity. What that requires, and these are the methods that everyone's leaping to when we look at AV in the first instance. Electoral roll, check against the electoral roll, check against online credit agencies, the likes of Experian and Equifax, who hold credit data about your credit history. Document checks against passports and driving licenses. Now these are onerous checks that require you to divulge a lot of sensitive personal data, and I think we need to move beyond that. Where can I get that assurance of age without having an absolute notion of who you are? I don't think we've seen the innovation that we need in this field yet. I'm hoping that over the course of the next couple of years we'll see some technological developments which will bring us an ability to make a statistical analysis of data, your online browsing habits, your social footprint through your social online networks. Can we get assurance of how old you are from your online activities? Now we've got no proof that actually works, but we need to develop that. So I think that's where I stand at the moment. I think there's a long way to go, but we have to rethink how we see this. And I think when we say age verification, that notion of verification ties us to identity. It's about assurance. It's about simply checking your age and finding the best ways of doing it.
Well, I'll bow to Chris's technical knowledge, but if I had an overall message to the industry, is that there needs to be a greater level of corporate responsibility regarding children. The clue to me is very much in the name. It's the adult industry, adult entertainment. It's for adults, it's not for children to see. And I think that the adult industry seems to view itself as being too precious to be regulated at times. You know, you have to age verify to buy alcohol, you have to age verify to buy tobacco, you have to age verify to gamble. Why the hell shouldn't you have to age verify to watch adult content? That's my key message. Corporate responsibility, take it on board. There are arguments to and for, you know, whether viewing hardcore pornography damages children. I think the argument has gone past that now. I think the age verification is really pushing forward. And I really think that the industry has got to stop bitching about it at times and actually say, right, how do we actually move forward with this? It's happening.
Good point. Jerry, do you have a response?
I'd say, I mean, absolutely, I'm not an advocate for putting children in front of screens and making them look at pornography. All four of us, I think, have got kids here, and there are perfectly good tools that exist today. My 2-year-old has a tablet. That's the state of technology today. It's perfectly well protected. My sister recently found that her 7-year-old daughter, my niece, was googling boobies and asked me how to install controls on her iPad, and I helped her set them up. So the tools to protect prepubescent children are there, and they've existed for a very long time. The idea that adult sites are responsible for stopping teenagers looking at them is a completely different thing, and I think, you know, the throwing around the word children to refer to 17-year-olds isn't a particularly accurate or honest thing. I think the other thing the industry should be aware of is that there is no sign this is going to roll out and be accepted internationally. I think Steve listed India, Russia, Canada, Iceland, Australia, which are all very censorious, fairly anti-porn regimes. The obvious one missing is America, and American authorities have tried to mandate a verification before for TV and other platforms, and the Supreme Court said it's illegal because it's censorship, and censorship is unconstitutional under the First Amendment. So this isn't going to happen worldwide, and it's probably never going to happen worldwide. So the question is, what's going to happen instead?
But you could say that, Jerry. The one thing, and I've listened in on this argument many times. At the moment, Germany uses age verification, and of course it has its issues, and the UK have their laws. Let us assume that within a 2-year period that technology and a solution is put together that does work, that does provide a vehicle for UK citizens and everybody that visits to, in effect, have a token that says, yes, I've been age verified and I can surf all of these age-restricted sites across the world. There's probably going to be a bit of common sense, I would imagine, with this. If Germany have done it and the UK have done it, there's many other countries in Europe at the moment that are watching what is happening. And I think there's probably a degree of logic that you've got to apply to this over some period of years, and it's not going to be literally tomorrow or next month. This could be 5 years' time. But if most of the common world are accessing adult content or age-restricted content, in fact, Terry before made something very relative. This is actually not just about pornography or adult-related content. There's also sites out there that cause parents a lot of concern on social networks, sites about suicide, bulimia, weapons, alcohol, gambling. There's lots of things that are being looked at under the microscope as far as this should be under some kind of verified access. Like, in effect, making the internet a bit like a shop front. You know, there are rules in normal life, they want the internet to be the same. So I think common sense and logic will probably get us there. Chris, one thing I'd like you to speak about, if you could. I sit with Chris on the Digital Policy Alliance at Westminster. Could you give us your view from inside Westminster? What was the motivation for the statement in the Conservatives manifesto, and what it actually is the real view of the politicians at the moment?
So, I mean, I'll start with this, just pick up on the filtering, because I think that's what was initially the motivation. Under the last government, the coalition government, we saw David Cameron pushing the ISPs to introduce filtering. and get to a point where we have active choice now. So at the point that you go with a new ISP, you will be given a very clear question that says, do you wish to install parental filters, that are ticked on. You can decline that choice, but that was what the government pushed the ISPs to do. Unfortunately, the take-up of those filters has been very low. Ofcom have done various studies. I think the initial report showed that only 10% of homes had actually enabled the filters. I think that may have raised now to more like 30%. The problem is also that they're very blunt instruments, these filters. It's either on or off as far as porn is concerned, and I think what inevitably happens, as with early antivirus software, is that they disrupt adult use of the internet, and they inevitably then get turned off, so they're useless. So, I mean, what has happened then is that, you know, the government, the last government, the coalition government, couldn't actually admit that it had forced the ISPs to spend millions implementing these systems. So what we saw in the Conservative manifesto, well, there was a pledge made early April that was quite detailed. It was a Facebook post from the then Culture Secretary, Sajid Javid, which sort of laid out this principle of ensuring that sites, irrespective of where they're based, would now come under a system similar to the one which AppVod runs. So just to clarify what AppVod's rules are, there are a series of 14 rules. If you are running a VOD service with an editorial base in the UK, so a presence here where the editorial decisions about the content is made, you have to notify that service. Secondly, Rule 4 says that you have to pay a fee for running that service. Thirdly, Rule 11 is very pertinent to the adult industry and states that if you are offering material which might seriously impair the development of minors, we can debate that a little bit, you have to place it behind access control, and it's that requirement for access control that gives us this age verification need. Finally, there is a new requirement that came in with the AVMS regulations in December last year that restricts prohibited material which is deemed to be too extreme for classification under a BBFCR 18. Unfortunately, this then cuts out a lot of extreme pornography, which would elsewhere in the world be legal. So that's the AppVod position. AppVod only regulates UK-based editorial services, and clearly the majority of traffic is going to the offshore sites. Hence, a government manifesto pledge to impose age verification for all pornographic websites. So this again expands the notion of where AppVod sits. AppVod regulates on-demand services. I think we all probably understand what that means, but it doesn't therefore regulate linear broadcast services offered online. It doesn't regulate cam services. It doesn't regulate adult dating services. So now what we're seeing is all those sites now being brought into the fold. What was interesting was that further to that, I mean, April onwards, we then saw the Conservatives elected to a majority government, albeit slim. I had half expected this requirement for AV to appear in the first Queen's speech. It didn't. There is another one coming November. It may be too early for us to get any kind of view from government. What government has actually said now, and I think we've been sort of treading water a little bit over the summer months. An online safety bill has been kicked around Westminster. This hasn't come from government. This was a private member's bill that Baroness Howe introduced, which has sought to place the requirement for AV on the ISP's shoulders. Clearly there is a reluctance for the ISPs to go down that route, but there is a precedent here with the mobile industry where the mobile network operators in the UK do actually lock down services for adult, whether that's porn or gambling, until your phone has been age verified. So Baroness Howe's proposal suggests that should be applied to the ISPs too. Clearly the ISPs don't want to step in. I think there's concerns from the ISPs about having to be the gatekeeper as such. In the second reading though of the online safety bill in the House of Lords on the 17th of July, Baroness Shields, who is the newly appointed Minister for Internet Safety and Security, the first time that we've had someone in a very clearly defined post, made a very coherent statement about what the government's position was. She didn't mince her words, and she said that she expects the adult industry to be answerable for its actions. And what government would like to happen, and this is looking at the offshore industry rather than the onshore industry, because we are already regulated. APVOD was designated in 2010, so I operate under those parameters that are laid down by APVOD. This new position that the government takes applies to all services, irrespective of their base, that are offering pornographic content. So the position that the government has adopted is to say they want the industry to self-regulate. They want a voluntary position. Now, I'm anticipating that that just isn't going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen because there is no need, unless there is legislation that gives the UK government and its enforcement agencies the ability to chase down services based offshore, then I think we'll see no action. So I think we will move to a legislative position very quickly. And that is what government has said. We expect the industry to self-regulate, and if the industry doesn't, they will legislate.
Okay.
Quite how they do that. So what they've proposed now is a consultation. So this is our chance as an industry to respond, to engage with government. DCMS has been open to dialogue. Portland have met with them. I know that others in the room have met with them. ICM, and also ISPs and other stakeholders to this whole debate. I think what we have to do as an industry now is come forward with a very coherent position, and that's where the DPA may be a useful point of contact, because it gives us an in to Westminster.
Okay, thanks for that, Chris. I think in summary what Chris is saying is that this is not easy. There is nothing simple about a minister in any government saying, right, that's it, I don't want children to look at porn anywhere in the world. Whilst that may sound simple to do, the reality is to put that into place where you can try and verify an individual who may be a resident of this country, but then what about the million people we get into Britain every month as tourists or visitors or military personnel? This is a really, really challenging thing, and to be honest with you, when ministers turn around and say, well, we'd like you to self-regulate more, the reality is, in my opinion, they don't know what to do either. There are lots of people working as closely as you could imagine and with the people at government to try and create some kind of solution. But it is a challenge. But let me just ask you this, Jerry. Let's just say it's a couple of years' time and technology has been developed that means every single person in the United Kingdom, whether they're resident or visitor, has to go through some kind of verification process. What other problems is that going to cause? Or is it a utopian degree of beauty?
Let's just clarify what that means in practice technically. What that means in practice is creating a firewall equivalent to the Chinese system of censorship, so that a regulator, Ofcom, can instruct ISPs at will to block sites by, not just by the thousands, by the millions. That's what's going to happen.
So the definition of a blacklist or a whitelist, yes, you have age verification, no, you don't.
Yeah, I mean, and that's really important. We shouldn't kind of be trying to talk around that. What is being proposed by certain members of government and by APVOD and probably by Ofcom is the strongest system of internet censorship ever seen in a democratic country. I've read the online safety bill, and basically it would make ISPs criminally responsible if they allow adult content to be viewed by a minor. Now, we're not talking about porn here, we're talking about adult content under the terms of the 2003 Broadcast Act, I think. So
yeah, but that's currently under review though.
Right, it's not just going to be porn. As we saw when the porn filters came in, they blocked all sorts of content, including non-sexual nudity. They blocked, suicide sites and self-harm sites were mentioned as if it was a good thing to block those. But I've spoken to psychologists about this, and they're really concerned that these sites are actually an outlet for people who may be suicidal.
Okay, so if I could just summarise, because no matter what technology solution may be created, you just think it's not going to happen. It's going to be defended and fought against, and freedom of rights, freedom of speech is going to stop all this happening.
Chris has a better idea than me whether it's going to happen, and you do, whether it's actually going to happen or not. I think it shouldn't happen, that's the difference.
Just on this point of blocking, so quite how it's done, how this is managed, whether or not the industry steps forward, we then have to look at how you deal with non-compliance. And that issue of blocking, yes, it was mentioned in the original Facebook post by Sajid Javid, but it didn't make it into the actual manifesto pledge. And actually, when Baroness Shields spoke in the House of Lords, she said that she nodded to the European regulations around net neutrality, which were agreed in June, and said this will restrict ISPs from blocking access to content. Now, whether there is a carve-out for child sexual abuse content is one thing. Whether there'll be a carve-out for other areas of child protection is another issue. But I don't think we can see any of this as purely a UK concern, as Steve has said already. The AVMS directive, which largely governs broadcasting but on-demand services in Europe, is under review at the moment. So that is up for consultation. There's a consultation that ends at the end of this month, and in that are a series of questions about child protection. And specifically about whether intermediaries should be held responsible, intermediaries being the ISPs or social networks, be responsible for material that is delivered via their networks. So I think there's a long way to go before we find a solution to work out how we do this. I think the question in the first instance is the adult industry prepared to accept some responsibility for its actions and deliver solutions?
You know, I'm going to answer that on behalf of the adult industry, if I may. One thing that's quite unique about what I do, not just the amount of wine I love to drink, but I do get to see companies in the adult industry from all over the world, and on their behalf, I promise you, I haven't found one yet that isn't interested or prepared or willing to try and do something. I think a lot of people just don't know what to do. They're kind of waiting and looking for advice and guidance. And the reality is, if they don't need to do anything today, they shouldn't, because it's just not commercially sensible. I am aware some of the biggest companies in the world that provide adult content are very willing at government level and coming forward with a view to, look, we are absolutely here to help. We'll do whatever it is we can actually do. But they're not saying, okay, we're not going to, take it sitting down. This is a very constructive process that is going on. I do think it's a hell of a challenge. I mean, Vince, let me ask you something. The XACP and the RTA labelling is out there. Does it actually do anything? Does it do enough? Could it do more? Could it be more substantive in this entire process?
I think the RTA label fulfilled a very valuable function at a time, certainly in America, in Europe to a certain degree, when it was down to the parents to monitor what their children were watching. By sites putting a restricted to adults label on there, it does nothing by itself. It only works in conjunction with the parents put on parental filters. Now we have one problem immediately. You look at the average household and the number of devices there are in a house. So if you have 2 or 3 kids, do you have to put all the parental controls on 10 devices? So that's very, very difficult. My personal belief is that RTA labelling fulfilled its purpose at a time. It still fulfills a certain purpose because parents still have a responsibility to monitor what their children are watching online. However, the last 2 years or so, we have certainly seen the goalposts move from a regulatory perspective regarding age verification. RTA labelling forms a part of that whole process, but it is not a silver bullet solution.
That's exactly what I thought you'd say. It's, this really is half the problem that everybody has. You imagine, okay, so let's now take this, guys. Let's say we have developed technology and some of the biggest players have come forward in the adult industry and the solution is out there and working. Any government, whilst they're looking for an industry to self-regulate, will put something in law, whether it's a British standard. There will be a law or a regulation or something. There has to be a stick with every rule. There has to be a penalty, there has to be a fine for people who don't comply. I just want to ask this question. What happens to the guy that decides not to comply, that does manage to get his site accessed by people from the UK, that then gets issued a fine by the regulator, and he's based in the Dominican Republic or Malta or wherever it is? How the f does that guy get fined? Because he starts another website the next day. Oh, what about VPNs? What about proxies? These are all questions we're having to ask at Westminster at the moment, so throw it out to you guys.
If I can just very quickly, my discussions with the Culture and Media Department and various government departments, they fully understand the difference between a 16, 17-year-old and an 8-year-old, they know virtual private networks. They know there is no total silver bullet solution which is going to stop 100% of people accessing porn, especially if they want to. I have a 13-year-old son. You know, I'd be more disappointed if he wasn't looking for porn. You know, that's the reality when you've got your boys, as long as it's controlled, as long as he knows what's reality and what's fantasy. So, it's really, really difficult.
So there has to be a balance.
That's got to be a balance.
So there has to be, okay, so to make this entire solution work, whatever it is, I guess you have to have some motivation for the consumer to want to have to go through this age assurance or age check process. You have to have some kind of motivation for the merchant to say, yes, I will accept this age verified person. And it's got to be adopted and taken on by the entire world at the same time, as and when they want, so they can comply with whatever regulations in place.
I think the motivation for an offshore company that wants to sell or have its content seen in the UK is to actually put the age verification in, otherwise it'll be blocked. You know, that's what I see ultimately happening. You have a tube
I believe it's exactly what will happen.
You will see a tube site that says no, bollocks to the UK, you know, but still wants its content to be seen. And then if it continues to evade any request or requirement for age verification put on, I can see that site ultimately being blocked.
Okay, Chris, we've been on this hamster wheel for many, many years with government and age verification. Let me ask you something. At the moment, because ministers don't really know what they want and they're asking us for guidance and advice and we're doing everything we can to help, take me in 2 years' time and the solution hasn't been found. Nobody's developed it. It doesn't work. It's not going to happen. There's just too many issues. What would government do? Would they come in heavy-handed with the law, or do you think they might just go, okay, next?
I think the government will come in heavy-handed sooner. You know, I don't think it will wait for 2 years. There is a consultation that will start in the autumn. That will probably run for a couple of months, so we'll expect responses to that to go before Christmas. And I think they'll deliver a response to that in the early part of next year. I think if we don't, so we will see something go into a Queen's speech with a view to legislation in the early part of next year. What I have said to DCMS, the Department for Culture, Media and Sport, is responsible for this review, is listen to industry, engage with industry, because my concern is that unless they do, whatever solution they attempt to put in place will be overridden by the big offshore companies who will just fund proxies and VPNs, and we will have got nowhere. So even if they've enlisted the ISPs to block, if they manage to do that and it's legal under European law, they will actually achieve nothing if the big companies are just...
Yeah, and then therefore is the summary. It's often written, self-regulation is better than clumsy legislation. And I assure you there are many people, even sitting in this room, and many others that are significant in the industry, that are sitting at Westminster, that are working with these politicians to try and create something that might just do the job.
Can I just pick up on a major stumbling block in all of this, and I'm sure it's something that Jerry will also talk to. The AVMS regulations that were introduced in December last year set a very low bar for the strength of content on sites that are offered in the UK market. And my concern is that they will expect that standard to be applied to offshore companies, and it will not work. Because effectively what that does, that means that any extreme fetish content or more extreme sexual activity, anything that tends on the non-consensual is completely ruled out. And I think, I've said this before, I think we have within the mainstream adult industry a sense of what our compliance levels are, of what an acceptable standard is. And I think, if the UK attempts to restrict all content globally to an R18 standard, it will fail. And I think they have to realise that. I think that needs to be, I think the AVMS regs need to be reviewed, I think they need to be challenged.
I think that's one of the other dynamics of adult content, is that it is different, every human being is different, everybody has different viewing habits, different countries in the world have different rules and regulations. It's a bit like the age of consent. There are countries in this earth we live in where you can be 12 to have sex. In America alone, the age of consent differs by state from 16 to 18. This is not a one cure solution, it is a hell of a challenge. Anybody got any questions at the moment?
Right, we've got all these guys at these meetings all pitching AV solutions. None of them are approved. So how far down the line is a British standard what says this is an approved AV system, what we can then take and put into place, knowing that it won't be challenged by the regulators?
So we're talking here about this British standard that we're working, well, a standard, a publicly available standard that the DPA is working towards together with its stakeholders. What it will not do, it will not give an absolute in respect of what services are and aren't compliant, but what it will do is define or attempt to give detail on the methodologies, the approved, the acceptable methodologies. How far down the line is it? That process has been kick-started now. A technical author is being appointed. A steering group is being assembled. If anybody would like to step up and be part of that steering group with the BSI PAS initiative, then speak to me or Steve. We both sit on the council of the Digital Policy Alliance, who are largely driving this. So at all levels there is an opportunity to engage, to help shape the way that standard may work, the way that policy may work. And I think what we tend to do with this whole AV piece is point the finger at VOD. VOD is simply the enforcer, and I think we always leave these things too late, as we did with the AVMS regs. We all knew the AVMS regs were coming 3.5 years previous to them being set into law, and then we scream and shout at VOD when VOD starts enforcing them. Policy happens at a higher level within Westminster, and I think we've realised now that we have to take it to the top, engage in the Commons and in the Lords at the highest level to ensure that we inform the policy prior to it being written.
It's like a convergence of minds, I guess. We're working down one stream, very cognizant of the people there in government working down another, that everybody knows what everybody's doing. But I promise you, the guys over here in government can do whatever they want, whenever they want, at whatever time, despite what we're doing. So it has its challenges.
Gary, I didn't answer your question. In terms of time frames, we think it will take 9 to 12 months to put a...
The reason I ask is that there may be a reason people are holding back, because they might say, right, I'm going to go with this guy and his system and put it in place, and then all of a sudden, hey, it's not an approved or recognised system within the British standard. So
I think it's a little bit like when you need to take a view on what are the acceptable means. AppVod has a list of approved tools. Okay, it might not be prescriptive in what those tools mean, but we've also seen that you can vary that list. We've managed to get acceptance of mobile AV. So let's not forget, AppVod is a co-regulator, so there is an ability to engage through the industry forum, through the adult provider network, and we have to do that. We have to take these opportunities.
And technologies are evolving. I mean, Ian Green at Veridy are working on social identity information that just through your online profile could give an indication as to whether or not you're a certain age. That hasn't gone through the process of being approved by a regulator. It may over the next week to year, I don't know. That could be something else that anybody can just, if it's approved, and this is the problem, this is the process. There's lots of innovation being tried and tested at the moment to try and help this whole problem. So, any other questions? Good looking gentleman in the back.
I was just wondering about on the question of censorship. The British Film Censorship Board really was established to control public entertainment, and they seem to be applying something to private entertainment, which is a very, very different type of consumption. And I was wondering if they had ever considered speaking with Visa International, because they were really the first organization to create limits, censorship as it were, of compliance, which was allowed and which was not allowed on the internet.
There's a mishmash of censorship laws in this country, and actually we're pretty much the most censored country in Europe already. And
Jerry, you can't say that was censored.
Part of the reason, a good part of the reason that all of this has come about is that we have the tightest TV censorship in Europe, the tightest video censorship in Europe, and the internet blew a great big hole in all that. And unless we censor the internet as well, then Ofcom and the BBFC start to look fairly worthless, and their censorship remit gets questioned. We don't need censorship of this kind. The rest of Europe doesn't see a need for it. The United States bans it. So as I say, My question, I have a question really for the adult industry. I was chairman of ATEL, and one thing I felt my responsibility was, in response to all of this, when we're told, when people like Apple point the finger and say your product, we think your product seriously impairs minors, surely the responsibility of the adult industry and adult industry lobbyists is to turn around and say, no, it doesn't. Your own research says it doesn't. Ofcom's own research says it doesn't. Research from 20 countries in Europe says there's no evidence that this product seriously impairs minors. Why is the adult industry not standing up for its product rather than coming along and saying, oh yeah, you're right.
Jerry, okay, Chris, would you like to respond to that?
Well, I mean, I think we're confusing things again. Age verification is not censorship. The AVMS regulations in the UK and the position of the BBFC are, yes, and I've already said I think there is a globally accepted standard. That standard comes down from the likes of Visa, who've got very clear guidelines on this, and that's what I would advocate within the UK. On the issue of harm, you know, there will never be any conclusive evidence that hardcore pornography is damaging to children. It would be unethical to conduct those studies, and I think we just have to get, you know, you've said this, Vince, already. Let's get beyond that point. Why do we wish adult content to be made available or to be available to children? Are we not better to say, let's ensure it is accessible only to adults and defend the right of adults to view that content? Isn't that a sensible position that we can all stand by?
It's not sensible, because to do so requires the most draconian censorship regime seen in any democratic country, as we've already discussed.
Jerry, I'm sorry, that absolutely.
So you think setting up a blacklist of millions of websites is acceptable for you, is it?
No. The point of the question is the technology to make this happen hasn't yet been created and is being created, but to continue to have the argument that watching pornography from a child's perspective may be okay. But that horse bolted out the stable years ago and shouldn't even be brought up.
The question is, do we need the strongest system of censorship in any democratic country?
No, we need an intelligent solution that's been created by great minds and great people who are willingly trying to make it
The
happen.
only way to persuade is to block every adult site in the world.
Adult sites can be viewed by adults.
The solution is to bring the adult industry to the table and work on solutions. We are being invited by government to come through the door and be part of the solution.
You know the online safety bill as well as I do, Chris.
The online safety bill has been pushed aside. Baroness Shields, read Baroness Shields' speech from the 17th of July, where she said, with all due respect, Baroness Howe, we like what you've said, but we're going to go far beyond this, but we're going to do it in a very proactive manner, and we're going to do it with industry engagement. And now the government is sat there waiting for us to come forward with solutions.
Chris, let me have another question to this gentleman.
Sorry, Jane, from TV. It means to separate the issues of censorship. Separate the issues of censorship from the commercial aspects of running adult entertainment with muddying the water. Of course we should be worried about censorship. Censorship is everywhere. As Joe has already rightly pointed out, we're heavily censored through all forms of the media in this country. For any of us to think that that's not going to work its way onto the internet is naive. It's always going to happen. But, you know, that's a totally, censorship is a totally, we're not just talking about adult, but there's those people running other businesses where these rules will impact them. And censorship is a different debate. It's not a debate to have around age verification. What we're talking about here is we've got a regulator in place who's already regulating us in the UK, making us use age verification. So commercially, we need to embrace it and adopt it to suit our needs, right? That's going to start impacting the sites that are coming into the UK. We can sit and shout all day about censorship about it. It's not going to do us any good. If we want to talk about censorship, we should find a vehicle to go and, you know, debate censorship on a wider issue, censorship of the internet, because obviously there's loads of outside benefits for the government in being able to censor the internet, right? Beyond, so maybe adult is used as a bit of a tool to bring in rules that they can then use to their benefit elsewhere in, you know, terrorism or anything else, you know, where they want to censor free speech. That's something we should all feel strongly about, you know, protecting our rights to free speech. However, to try and strap it to a vehicle like adult is naive, because everyone's going to go, what, you want kids to look at porn? So you're ruining your censorship argument by making, you should really call your thing not sex and censorship. You should drop the sex bit and just do something else about freedom and censorship and separate the two issues, and let's work on a commercial.
And I think this is
what works for us.
I think what we've realised in Westminster is that, you know, We can't see this AV as a solitary adult industry pursuit. And what we've sought to do through the Digital Policy Alliance Age Verification Working Group is look at it as a cross-sector problem concern. So we've got the gambling industry involved, we've got the online dating industry involved, the tobacco industry, the e-cigarettes industry who's scratching its head about what's going to happen with regulation, the alcohol industry, anybody who's serving age-restricted products and services online. And that is getting attention because it takes away that dirtiness that parliamentarians might feel is associated with engaging directly with the industry. And I think that's crucial. We have to maintain that position.
I think something else to remember, if I may just add, which may stimulate another question. As human beings, we actually enter an enormous amount of data onto the internet throughout our lives. It's absolutely enormous. Even a credit card, you can find out how much fuel you put in your car. The amount of data you can get is unbelievable. So the concept of a solution that allows a human being to, in effect, end up with a token per se. I'm not saying this is what's going to happen, but to have, in effect, be verified, to have your verified token would then say, yes, I can now serve all the porn sites, whether it's gay, straight, tranny, whatever you want, anonymously, anywhere in the world, using the fact you've been through this verification process, actually isn't such a bad thing, if we can get to that degree of technology. Everybody has so much data on them, governments all over the world. Honestly, you'd be surprised. There's another question. Yes, sir.
This is relating to the mechanisms that are currently used. Okay, many years ago people would tick a box saying I'm over 18, obviously that doesn't prove anything. Now you get a chance to put in a name, address, date of birth. That doesn't prove that's you. That could be your dad. Any 15-year-old boy could do that. And surely it's much better to find a mechanism that checks at point of transaction, which might be the mobile device of the person, or if the banks could pass an age from
Okay, so I agree with you on that. I mean, this issue of spoofing of identity, I don't like to talk about it too much because it might undermine certain things that are acceptable. That that's a principle that has been acknowledged by the gambling industry for the last 10, 12 years. So, but I agree. But we're only by highlighting those facts, you only introduce that additional tier of authentication, which I agree makes sense. When we do our mobile AV checks, we drop a text to your phone. You then consent to the age verification. So you have to be in possession and awareness of that age verification process. So it's pinned to that device. Can we tie the age token to a device down the line? Possibly. Should the banks be involved at the table? Absolutely. We're trying to do that through the Digital Policy Alliance. And
all the telcos. Anybody with big data should be absolutely part of this entire story. Why should Gary have to put an age verification system in today that might cost him £1 to verify every single person that may or may not spend any money? That's just commercial suicide. So there has to be a lot of intelligence and sort of, hey government, we're coming together to help you cure a problem, step up to the plate and help us at the same time. Shai, you had a question.
I just want to add that we face a lot of these issues from the bidder perspective because credit cards, obviously we assume as well from companies that if you are holding a credit card, you are 18 and up, and the reality is I can make a credit card for my 6-year-old son that I don't have. So it's the same question. I mean, these guys are going to take responsibility for such things, knowing that they are providing credit cards for minors under the IP or the general PIG account of the adult, and then they send to us users that are minors, but with legit option to purchase credit in adult sites.
Well, I can honestly answer that for us. One of the conversations that happens a lot is actually what is a verification? Is it I'm 18? Yes. Or is it an iris scan and fingerprints in your DNA? It goes from here up to there, and what actually is going to end up being an acceptable level? What, as a consumer, would you be prepared to say, yes, actually, I've gone through this process and I've got my token, and I've paid £1 or £5 to do it, and I can now use this all over the world, and I feel comfortable. It's a proper system. A bit like getting onto the gambling industry. You've got to go through a big process to prove you are who you say you are for gambling. And sometimes going through a really good formal process of verification makes you feel better because you know it's something of substance. So, again, that's debated a lot.
I just wanted to add to Shai's comment that as a data processor, Visa and MasterCard can't hold customer level data anywhere. So, a credit card is not a viable form of data verification at all.
Yeah, that's ad hoc for you, is it not, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, it's like the question that you posed, you know, spoofing, you know, credit card, is it, but it's good enough for the moment, and what I'm seeing to, we're trying to build on where we're at the moment. Let's not try and undermine what is. Yeah, we can all. So, but I guess what this does, it allows us to look at lighter touch approaches and say, well, actually, this is as good, if not better, than credit cards or just, you know, keying in data.
Do you not feel that the moral approach of the government is that they're not concerned about the 15, 16, 17-year-olds who are actively looking for pornography as such? They are more concerned, from a moral perspective, about younger children stumbling across pornography. Now, I know virtual networks. I'd never heard about getting credit cards for 6-year-old dogs. 6-year-old dogs or 6-year-old dogs. You know, but I think the whole moral push on this is for people to stop stumbling across. You're always going to get 15, 16, 17-year-old kids going looking for porn, and fair play to them. You know, if you can get a virtual private network and want to see somebody shagging, great, that's nature. And I don't think the government is even that concerned about that level. They're concerned about the other level, the other end of the scale.
I just want to read you guys something that amused me, just to put everything we're trying to do in perspective. I got really interested when India came up with this position to ban the porn sites, and I drilled down and I found out why, and they had to refer to something called their Rule 12, and I'll read this a little bit out to you. These sites should be blocked when it is necessary or expedient so to do in the interests of sovereignty and integrity of India, defence of India, security of the state, friendly relations with foreign states or public order, or for preventing incitement to the commission of any cognizable offence relating to the above. That is what government went, oh yeah, we'll fucking block those. Now, let's go cure the world and put this right. Can I thank our panellists? As you obviously aware, this is a really interesting problem. Thank you guys. And we'll keep doing everything we can, and please keep doing everything you can.